The world changed in 1991 when the Soviet flag was lowered for the last time over the Kremlin. In its place was raised the flag of Russia, and what many hoped would symbolize a new era of freedom and Western-style democracy.
By the fall of 1991, Russia was moving towards independence in agreement with other Soviet republics. The Soviet Union was about to be dismantled.
People, including myself, who lived in the Soviet Union at the time, didn't see it coming. People were ready for a change. They wanted Western values. They wanted democracy.
There was a lot of hope that the new Russia, which also became an independent state like every other former republic, would change, that they will become a country of normalcy with human rights, democracy.
A new era began, an era when we had genuine freedom of the media in Russia, when elections actually mattered, and when the outcome of the elections was determined by how people voted.
Russian President Boris Yeltsin faced the task of implementing an array of political and economic reforms, the seeds of which had been planted by the Soviet Union's last premier, Mikhail Gorbachev.
Almost everybody was facing extreme uncertainty and alarm at a collapsed economy, empty shelves, high inflation, and tremendous political turmoil.
Under the advice and guidance of Western economists, Western business leaders, and Western politicians, Russia started to implement what has become known as shock therapy reform.
A chicken costs nearly 2 weeks' pay. Only those with hard currency are assured of getting something.
Tens of thousands of state-owned enterprises had to be privatized, reshaping the entire Russian economy.
It was seen as really something like the period of the 1870s, 80s, and 90s in the United States, with the robber barons doing exceedingly well and the people not doing well, and their standard of living falling.
Each state enterprise was assigned a certain number of vouchers, and then people could buy them up. Those who had the connections, who had some money already, not your average Russian citizen, were able to buy mass amounts of these vouchers.
I think the greatest tragedy is the selling off of Russia to the oligarchs. And the partnership with the United States was what has come to be called shock therapy, which was presided over by someone I now admire, Jeffery Sachs.
It's so much slower than any of the other high inflation countries has gone through. This has been an excruciating process.
I didn't myself design or work on the Russian privatization. I was on the financial side, but I watched with growing alarm at what was actually happening in privatization. Many in Washington thought that at least those assets would go to supporters of Yeltsin and thereby help to stabilize Yeltsin's government.
Policymakers in Washington welcomed the chance to find common ground with Russia, a country they had countered strategically throughout the Soviet era with NATO, an anti-communist military alliance of North American and European nations.
In the 1990s, there was this general view that Russia should be and could be integrated into Western institutions. So not just Western economic institutions, liberal market economies, the globalized marketplace, but also Western security institutions.
I was actually in the room when Boris Yeltsin asked Manfred Werner, then Secretary General of NATO, to allow Russia to join NATO. And that was vetoed. I think that was a huge mistake, one of the greatest mistakes probably of the 20th century. And we reap what we sow.